It is April 7th, right? 2021, 158 in A Course in Miracles student workbook. Today, I learned to give as I receive. Okay. So, you do the lesson. States that you're sinless forever, right? We've gone through our reincarnation. If not, then you're watching this and kind of realizing what a reincarnation can actually look like, right? Created out of love, right? Because that's the image of God. You can't unlearn what you know, right? So it's knowledge you cannot lose. So once you are granted access to this. Sorry, I just had a little moment where it says that, in this surrender state of consciousness, that's when the vertical dimension of depth opens up to you, okay? So know that you can't unlearn what you learned, right? Now, the other thing about this is that it can't be learned, right? This is not something that is by thy will, right? Your own will. It's not my will, it's thy will. Okay, so we have to consistently understand that most of our decisions have already been made, okay? And it's our duty to become realized in that, to become in alignment with everything in life, right? Because when you are in alignment, everything is very easy and in flow. When you're going against the currents, that's when things are, trying to wake you up, if that makes sense. So, when we understand experience can't be shared directly, vision can, right? So, the way that, I guess, the teachers of this teach and try to embed this in people is by the vision, right? So we have vision at the top of the pyramid. We have the environment, action, behaviors. We have skills and capabilities, values and beliefs, identity and purpose. That's where vision is at the top, right? This is where we were talking about with Jordan Peterson in terms of the eye of Horus, right? The thing that grabs your attention, that orients you, your higher self is pulling you towards these things, okay? So a teacher can't give experience because he didn't learn it, right? It has revealed itself as its appointed time was given, okay? So most of this really occurs with the density of the pain body, right? The, this vessel, right, has a lot of things embedded through genetic sequences, generations, experiences, nature and nurture, right? The density and the intensity of, right, the arising presence. So how much can your intensity dissolve all this pain? And how quickly you can do that by being as intense as possible. So when you are in this rendered state of consciousness, it can be just like that, right? So that's why it can be gradual or it can be instant, right? So when you look at yourself, you have to understand the mind can't go beyond the mind, right? So you have to be rooted in being and not in your mind, getting lost into it, okay? So now we're starting to see the highest light in people when we're present, right? Light beyond the body, right? There's no separation between you and other people, right? So when you see other people and you have this inclination to be like, oh man, this is gonna suck, or whatever it may be, right? It doesn't really matter. You're starting to understand that, you can just change that. Just be like, oh no, this is gonna be really good, right? Just affirm yourself, right? So the only way that I can teach this is because I've achieved it, right? So now you have to do it for yourself, right? So you won't understand truth until you experience truth. So it says everything is now replaced by His holiness. So we're looking at everything with the eyes of Christ, if you want to call it. Christ being lost in sin, right? If you believe that you can sin, you're saying that Christ can sin too. And that's impossible, right? So the light forgiven, right, that you have within yourself is by yourself, right? So now you're forgiving yourself. So I wanted to introduce this idea, right, of paying attention to one thing, right? We're talking about Zen. So the way I do it is doing jujitsu. Some people can do this by going out, right? They get very Zen because they're very present. And then we'll see the other side of that. And then acting is another way of that. So when you get in this flow, right, you either see the world as collaborators or competitors, right? To them, right, you start to see that you don't have to think, right? You start to, let's just say that you're doing jujitsu or you're acting, right? You get in this very Zen, right? Whatever it is, and everything is just tunnel vision, right? It's because if you think of anything else, then you're not really you're gonna have a really shitty day. You're gonna get choked out, or you're just gonna have to do the same take over and over and over again. Okay, so you don't have to think what it is, right? You're just reacting to them, right? And you're keeping yourself into that flow. So that's why you go to masters for meditation so they can get you into that flow. You go to dating coaches to get you into that flow. You go to jujitsu coaches or jujitsu to get in that flow. You go to other actors to get in that flow, right? So we are now making something together, right? It's almost like, for me, the art of jujitsu, right? You shield yourself from everything else and grab from the things that grab your attention, whether it's your phones, your outside life, all that crazy bullshit, right? And then it just creates this nice synergetic feeding, right? Because you're helping each other get better, right? Everybody's training, you're improving yourself while everybody's out seeking attention, if you really want to call it that. So paying attention to get to that point, right, of flow, right? You see that you're part of a larger, right? You have this oceanic consciousness now. So what we're starting to understand, right, is that once you consistently choose love, peace, or forgiveness, it leads you out of the house of mirrors. Okay, so think of the law of mirrors and think of the looking glass, right? So we look at how we see others look at us. It's not what I think, right, I am, it's what I think you think I am, right? So of course it's going to be very crazy for you, and you have to be able to break these mirrors sometimes, let go of the broken mirrors, or just get out of the house, right? Go to a different part of the world and realize who you really are, because you're starting to see the world as you are, okay? So it's not seeing yourself in the world, it's letting the world see itself through you, right? So through the eyes of Christ. Now, what I wanted to introduce specifically is loving relationships, right? So if you're very dedicated to a spiritual path and you find someone that is also willing to grow with you spiritually, that is a great way to find enlightenment, okay? Because some people would say it's a sacrifice only because they're functioning from that paradigm. If you're looking at this, right, to choose, to have the opportunity, not because not because you have to do this, because you get to do this, to dedicate yourself to something, right? So it could be jujitsu, it could be Zen, it could be going out, it could be a relationship, okay? So there's different forms of being present and letting that unmanifested come through that portal of love, right? That's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to put love into something, right? Whether it's going out, right? You're trying to learn about yourself, and you're learning to love yourself while the whole world is rejecting you, right? So you see the flaws of yourself and you get into flow. So it mentions the serious student's spiritual commitment changes the context of life. What was once attractive and exciting may now seem superficial, shallow, irrelevant, and annoying. And what was previously considered boring is now attractive and valued as a great opportunity. So if you were going out and now you find one woman, see, right? Explore that. See this great opportunity. Along the spiritual path, blocks and temptations appear, as well as doubts and fears, right? These are tests that arise from the ego, overcome by reaffirmation of goals and commitment, reinforcing the principles of dedication, tenacity, constancy, courage, conviction, and intention, okay? So with this, we change the way we look at things. The things we look at change, right? So we have to understand, what is the difference between gaining attention and paying attention, right? So we can look at it as an artist, right? a lot of our social media, even with this, right, is trying to sell attention. Train to want that attention, and it's never enough, right? You'll never arrive. And once you start to see that your creativity is being driven by a desire of attention, you'll never be creatively fulfilled, right? And whatever that may be. And that's really what the unmanifested, the Holy Spirit, your Atman, your Buddha nature, your Christ consciousness is trying to manifest, right? In something that you love, that is challenging, that you can dedicate and just allow yourself to acknowledge yourself, okay? Because the greater the challenge, the greater the development of the inner strength, decision, and determination, right? So everything is preparing you for everything else, and like how you do anything is how you do everything. So it's now preparing you to understand, because we crave attention, because it's this acknowledgement of our existence, that we matter, that we mean something, that we are here for a reason, right? And it's a recognition, praise, admiration. This is love, right? If we have love, then we survive, then we can keep going. And this is what the ego is trying to do, right? It's like, you can be very present, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, I can have all the attention focused on me. And you see this with a lot of dating coaches a lot, right? That's why they get in their egos. So if you become nobody, right? Like nobody wants to be nobody. Nobody wants to be the dating coach nobody understands and knows, right? Because you don't exist, which means that you're creating this death within you, right? Everybody's going to forget about you. It doesn't really matter, right? So what jiu-jitsu does for me specifically, or what acting could do for other people, is that you're content with being nobody in particular, content for not standing out. You align yourself with the power of the universe, right? And that's really what it is, right? You go out, you go to a different city, nobody knows who you are, right? But you create such an effect in the world, and people are just like, man, that guy was fucking awesome, right? You add each other on Facebook, and you don't even talk. You could be 20, 30 years later on, and you're like, man, I remember that guy. That guy was pretty cool. Now he has kids. That's really cool. Like on Facebook, whatever, right? In jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing, right? You are content with being nobody, right? Because you have to leave your ego out the door. You're going to get fucking tapped, right? Everybody's after you, and, like, if you're not giving your best, like, what are you doing, right? So it's not wanting to stand out because, one day you have a bad day, one day you have a good day, right? And you're aligning yourself with the power of the universe, which is basically understanding that you can cut the learning curve of all that because you're getting in the flow, because you're doing this Zen practice with everybody else, right? And because you're consistently doing it, right, you're cutting the learning curve in half again, right? Because you're learning in flow. So basically, allowing yourself to be humbled, right? Like for me, I always go at the end of the line, even though I'm supposed to be in the front. And it's basically this, who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted, which means that you'll be praised, right? Because again, you're nobody when you go in there, right? It's same practice. Everybody goes in, everybody leaves all this shit out the door, right? And it's a temptation of gaining attention, right? Because again, it allows us to survive. It allows us to have control, right? So you see people looking at me, and I can control where I want you to look at, right? Because people aren't self-cognizant of themselves, right? They're self-conscious of themselves. They're not conscious of their self. So creating an effect, right? Getting into your power by paying attention, the presence. So you look at actors, right? They're aware of who they are, and they have to get in this Zen mode. They have to get this tunnel vision, but yet not lose themselves into it, right? You see method actors that lose themselves, and how that turns out pretty badly, right? So you have to have attention on the inner body, not all on the outside world, right? So you can't be in your body without being intensely present, right? This is what you have to do, right? So the decisions are now coming naturally to you. So now that you're in alignment and present with everything, right? Instead of living in a world that is the external reflection of the ego, it's an external reflection of the self, okay? So the decision arrives already made, right? Through awareness and not through thinking. You can't have the mind go beyond the mind. And nothing happens that's not meant to happen. Nothing happens that is not part of the greater whole. So that's why these movies turn out very perfectly, because sometimes these weird moments where they're like, what just happened? They'll put it in there, right? So it creates this whole being, right? So thought that was beautiful. I hope you guys enjoy that. Love you much.